and get started because I know we have other things that we have going on, and we also want to be sure that we are able to answer questions too for folks who are jumping on. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Christina Shervinka, and I'm the COO and co-founder of Five Buffalo Capital. And what we focus on with Five Buffalo Capital is real estate investing through a fund, through a fund model. So we are a private fund. And in meeting Dr. Al-Barwani, we realized that we both have a passion for helping people. And so I do that through helping people build wealth and trying to help them have a diversified portfolio through offering real estate investments. And she does that as a doctor. So Dr. Al-Barwani, will let you introduce yourself and go ahead and start our presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. And thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I am really excited about our topic today. When you proposed it, I was like, oh, that's a great idea, because when I talk about healthcare, I'm often talking about it from like a doctor's hat, of course, like, these are the things that you should do, shouldn't do. And we're still going to be doing that today. But I love the lens of also like, okay, great. Maybe you don't care so much about your health, but maybe you care more about saving money. So, how can we blend the two? And so I love what we have today. And so my background as a physician is in family medicine as well as obesity medicine. So I'm double board certified. I'm also a coach. And I do a lot of work around helping people to manage stress, emotional overwhelm, and kind of, I always say stepping into the better version of themselves, which for some people it resonates. For others, they're like, what does that mean? But, if you're ever feeling stuck and feel like you just don't know how to get to that next step in whatever your life plan is, I'm your woman. And so that's something that I do and help people to kind of understand themselves a little bit better so that they can achieve that. And so if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and start sharing the slides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and I think that I had it actually, because when we're doing our trial, I had it set on the last slide. So let me get it to the beginning of the slideshow, and then I'll go ahead and share here in a second. All right. Okay, can you see that?
Yes. Yes, we're good to
Okay,
go.
perfect. So topic for today is talking about healthy living and smart investing. And as I just introduced myself, my name is Dr. Aalia Al-Barwani. I'm board certified family and obesity medicine physician, and my specialty in coaching is with NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. And there's a little bit about managing stress that'll come up in other slides that I'll kind of touch on later. I definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. So if any participants have questions, please go ahead and pop them in the chat. And feel free to interrupt me and ask any questions. All right, so the agenda for today, we're going to be breaking down this topic into several parts. We'll start by talking about the cost of chronic conditions, and we'll hit on some major and more commonly known ones like diabetes, heart conditions, obesity, and how that can impact your pocket, basically. And then I'll be talking about some actionable and practical tips to help prevent these chronic conditions in different decades of your life. I'll go over some simple habits that you can also start to incorporate into your day-to-day that can save you money and potentially improve on your health as well. And then I'll hand it over to Christina, and she'll cover the last two topics here. All right, so I want to start by talking about the cost of chronic conditions. And as you may expect, because everything else is going up, as is the out-of-pocket cost of paying for any health condition that you might have. And to put things in context, back in 1970, the average person was paying about $115 out of pocket. And in 2022, when the study was done, the average person was spending over $1,000, so $1,425 out of pocket, which is a major shift, a major increase. And this graph here, which thank you, Christina. I definitely want to give you credit for sharing and pointing me to this resource, because I was blown away just looking through this. As a physician, I'm really more interested in your health. And so seeing these numbers was an eye-opener for me as well. And so what this graph shows, essentially, if we look at the blue, that is anybody who's ever been diagnosed with the condition that's down there on the bottom axis here. So this first one is for arthritis, asthma, cancer, cholesterol, diabetes, etc. And then the green is for the out-of-pocket cost of healthcare for anybody who's never been diagnosed with that condition. And as you would expect, the graph for anyone who has been diagnosed is going to be higher because they're paying more for whatever it is. And again, this is just out of pocket. So this isn't what insurance is covering, because I'm sure those costs are even higher than what we're paying out of pocket. However, you can see that if you do have a chronic condition, and these are some of the more common chronic conditions, you're going to be spending more on your health than somebody who was not diagnosed with said condition. And some of our biggest differences here are arthritis, which is so common as we age, cancer, high cholesterol as well, stroke, right? We see really big differences in somebody who has a chronic condition versus somebody who doesn't. So hopefully this is starting to get the wheel spinning and thinking about, okay, even just from this general overview, if you have a chronic condition, you will be spending more out of pocket. And then this graph here breaks down by generation. And so we do also see a similar trend, which is as we get older, and I think most of us, if we kind of were to guess, would guess that this would be the case, that as we get older, we do spend more on our health. And it's quite considerable if we compare somebody who is 65 and older to a child. It's almost 5 times more spending, and almost 2.5 times from somebody who's around working age to somebody who is in retirement, 65 plus. So again, just that similar trend that as we age, there is this expectation that we will have to pay out of pocket for not just our chronic diseases, but other things related to our age. And I want to take a moment to talk about obesity specifically, one, because it's near and dear to my heart as an obesity medicine physician, but also because it is something that we're seeing on the rise. I haven't looked at the most recent statistic for this year, but as of last year, almost half of the US population had either overweight or obesity, which is really, really high, right? If you think about any other medical condition, I think that any other one that was that high, we would be actively doing something about it. And thankfully we are with obesity. However, there's been a lot of pushback if you're paying attention to a lot of medications and coverage and things like that for the treatment and management of obesity, that I'll leave that discussion for another time, or if anyone has questions. But I wanted to kind of highlight here just the differences for out-of-pocket cost over time. So this is 2011, and now in 2021, just the difference with the dark blue being anybody who's ever been diagnosed with diabetes, and the green would be somebody who does not have obesity. And it is almost double. No matter which graph you're looking at, it's almost, your out-of-pocket cost is going to be almost double, if not more. And so again, this is just kind of highlighting obesity, which we do consider is a chronic condition, is also, it doesn't escape that previous graph that we saw, that if you are diagnosed with a chronic condition, you can expect to pay more out of pocket. And I do want to put a little caveat here that it's not necessarily obesity itself that's expensive in and of itself, as opposed to potentially being associated with other chronic health conditions, right? So it could be that a lot of the things that somebody who has obesity struggles with includes arthritis, includes cancer, because we do know that obesity is associated with so many other medical conditions. And so I do think that that's something that is important to keep in mind too. I want to move into now talking about, okay, we've talked about why this is important, why this should matter to the average person, right? From a cost perspective, health perspective, and then now what can we do about this? And so we can start as early as in your 20s, right? I mean, there's an argument for even starting before that. However, your parents need to be in the room for that one. And so we'll start in our 20s, right? And so each of the different tips that I've shared, I've also shared the resource for you to go and if you wanted to look into more details of the recommendation. But I've compiled a few of the more important ones that I notice in my discussions with patients that they either forget about or don't think is important. And so I want to highlight those items. And so in our 20s, it's really important to start to build and to start to learn about our health and build habits that would be things that we can continue to maintain throughout our lifetime. And so movement is so important. You've heard a body in motion stays in motion. It's on, I can't remember what ad for what drug, but it's true, right? And so if we start to get into the habit of moving our bodies regularly, that can be really helpful for building muscle, as well as building kind of that active lifestyle that we want to see later in our lives. Balanced nutrition, that comes from really eating foods that are rich in fiber, proteins, omega-3s. And for people who are like, what does that even mean? So fiber-rich foods would be plant-based foods, are really rich in fiber, and that's the stuff that helps you to keep your bowel movements regular, to keep your gut health nice and healthy. Lean proteins are super important, that we're talking about things like turkey or chicken or lean cuts of meat. Those are, and even plant-based sources of protein. And that's really important for building muscle, as well as other functions, including metabolism. Omega-3s, those come from fatty fish such as mackerel or salmon, or sometimes you may even see eggs nowadays. They are infused, or there's added omega-3s in that. And that's really good for brain health. That's really good for metabolic function as well. And then mental health, right? So that's something that I find that nowadays we're starting to talk a little bit more about with everything that's been happening, especially post-COVID. And it's really important. And I see a lot of patients in their 20s who are really just kind of struggling with adulting, right? To borrow that term that we use in everyday speak. And so oftentimes that transition into early adulthood can be linked with stress. And so this is important to pay attention to and to handle, or to kind of address sooner than later, mainly because we do know the effects of chronic stress on our health, including the risk for depression, et cetera, later on in life. And then the fourth tip for folks in their 20s is preventative screenings. I know that people come to me in their 20s and there's like two broad camps. Either they were dragged because they had a problem, or they're like, oh, I want to get a physical. And it's really important. Some people are, ones that are dragged in there, I'm like, hey, have you had an annual? They're like, I'm still young. I'm like, yes, you are young. However, this is when it's really good to establish those baselines, right? Like especially if you have a sedentary lifestyle, you have family history, genetics playing a big role in your potential for developing chronic diseases like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, high diabetes, et cetera. This is a good time to start developing or establishing your baseline. It doesn't have to be a yearly screening for those in their 20s. It could be every couple of years is fine as well, if you have no risk factors, basically. But it is still important to establish that baseline. In your 30s, this is where we notice that muscle mass starts to decline slowly. So it's important, again, back to like movement. So the themes kind of stay the same as we go throughout the decades. However, the focus may change a little bit. So in your 30s, you really want to start to build that muscle mass. And so the focus on resistance training increases, as opposed to like aerobic activity. So think more Pilates or weight-based activity, as opposed to like, running has to some degree, but not as much as, for example, something like doing a nice little, what am I trying to say? Like a strength training workout. And it doesn't have to be in the gym either. A lot of people are intimidated when physicians or practitioners say that, because they think they have to go to the gym and like lift really heavy and hire a trainer. It can really just look like you getting hand weights, or if you were to go walking with like a weighted vest, for example, or weights on your ankles and your wrists, for example. So something that just adds a little bit of resistance to the movement that you're doing. And then when we go into nutrition health, this is also, this theme continues throughout the decades, and this is really improving your gut health Your gut health is really associated with so many things, including your mental health, actually. We know that over 90% of our feel good hormone is made in our gut, which when I found that out, I was like, that's crazy. We should be talking about this more. And so oftentimes people who have depression or mental, other mental health conditions or illnesses, it's really important to pay attention to what are you eating? What are you feeding? Are you literally feeding your body what it needs? And so that's in the form of, again, those plant-based fibers and polyphenols, which are anti-inflammatory. So again, the general idea is making sure you have a plant-rich diet or plant-rich eating plan to make sure that you're kind of helping your gut health. Blood sugar stability. So again, that comes with the risk of IR stands for insulin resistance and prediabetes. This increases as we get older and in our 30s. And so making sure that we're prioritizing complex carbohydrates. So that means as opposed to, for example, white rice or white grains, which are considered refined, you want to do complex. So you want to do multigrain or whole grain, actually, rather. And so, or quinoa or barley, things like that, which have some fiber to them. And so your body is able to break that down and process it slowly over time, as opposed to getting those quick spikes in blood sugar, which lead to itis and other things right after meals. Proteins become even, continue to stay important in our diet, and healthy fats as well. And then when we talk about somewhat related to mental health, however, just kind of health and helping to have healthy metabolism and health in general, we want to pay attention to our sleep. And so the goal is to aim for at least between 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep, and with the highlight on quality. And so that means that you're getting restful sleep, that you're feeling rested in the morning. And so oftentimes people, the reason this becomes important is to give you an example of somebody who has sleep apnea, for example. They may be in the bed for 7 to 9 hours, right? Or they may think that they may have slept for 7 to 9 hours, but if they have a smartwatch or if they've ever had a sleep apnea test, that test will show them that actually you were awake for over 50% of the night, or you never really got into that restful stage of sleep, and you were frequently waking yourself up from your snoring, or you're dropping your oxygen levels, etc. And so that quality is equally important. So if you're waking up at most mornings and you're not feeling rested and it's hard for you to get through your day, maybe a sign for you to talk to your doctor about getting a sleep study or looking into your sleep. And so as we move into the 40s, now our risk for cardiovascular diseases continue to increase. So that's high blood pressure, diabetes, and dyslipidemia, which is just cholesterol issues. They become more apparent in this decade. And so again, looking at your diet, which is the third point here, but looking at your diet and continuing to add more heart healthy foods, again, plant-based. And it doesn't mean you have to become vegetarian or vegan. However, just to throw another number at you, majority of Americans, and I'm talking about upwards of 90%, another crazy statistic, do not meet their dietary recommendations for fiber a day. And so I continue to stress fiber because I don't think that we will ever be at a point where we're eating too much. So continuing to add plant-based sources is a great way to increase your fiber. And then again, those antioxidants and omega-3s in the form of fatty fish. And if you don't like, or if you don't have the opportunity to eat foods that contain omega-3, then you could do supplements as well. And another thing I wanted to add, because this picture prompted it, is our chia seeds. Those are really high as well in fiber. And I believe omega-3s as well. So it could be another way that you can supplement it, add it to your yogurts or your smoothies, things like that. For women in particular, as we move into our 40s, we have big shifts in our metabolism as a result of changes in our hormones, right? So we are actually as early as in our 30s, can be in the perimenopausal period, which means the years surrounding when we reach menopause. And menopause is the period after which we don't have periods anymore. And so we have big shifts. We can have big shifts in our hormones around this period. And so in our 40s, we may experience that to a greater degree. And so those would look like maybe hot flashes, irritability, changes in mood, trouble sleeping, weight gain, specifically in our abdomen, and increased fat storage. And so we know that, again, these are the impact of the shifts in our metabolism. So increasing your protein is another really, really good way. If you're noticing a theme, increasing your protein, eating more vegetables, increasing your fiber, like that is the song that I sing. And so that really does play a role here as well. Improving and increasing your strength training, that again is building muscle, that impacts your metabolism, and that can help to reduce some of that visceral fat, which is that fat that sits over your organs and around your stomach. And that's the sick fat. That's the fat that really is linked with bad heart health and things like that, and insulin resistance. And then again, going back to mental health and emotional health, kind of that cognitive. So now thinking about cognition, more specifically relating to how your brain is functioning. And then we think about cognitive decline, we think about dementia. That's the word that people will generally use. And so kind of now building that foundation for having good brain health into our older years. Older years, trying to be PC here. And so some of the things that I thought this was really interesting that it came up in my research, or as I was putting this together, was HRV biofeedback, which stands for heart rate variability. For those who may not be aware, a lot of the smartwatches now, and we even have Ultrahuman and Oura rings, these devices that are measuring our stress. It's actually measuring HRV, our heart rate variability, and that's basically just correlated to stress for the most part. And so what this is saying is getting into meditation and breath work and other modalities and techniques that can help to lower stress, essentially. And that's what they mean here from this journal about improving vagal tone and nervous system regulation. These are all fancy words to say manage your stress better. And these are ways that you can do that through breath work, meditation, etc. And if anyone has questions at the end, that's actually something I'm specifically certified in, is to do that kind of work. And so now we go into 50s and beyond. And again, similar theme now, again, with muscle and bone prevention. We want to now think about also fractures, right? We want to think about bone strength, bone health, and that's all tied in with metabolism. So you have been building this all along. Now we want to add another layer, and that's with adding supplements such as vitamin D or calcium into the mix. Anti-inflammatory continues to be a theme because we want to, again, reduce our risk for inflammation. Inflammation is linked to diabetes and heart disease and cancer and high cholesterol, autoimmune disorders. So again, that theme, we continue that to a greater degree in our 50s. And with maintaining and staying active, it becomes sometimes for some of us, it can become a little bit more difficult in our older years. And so I love this, I think, really easy, actionable tip, which is to try to get between 7,000 to 10,000 steps a day. And so it's easy to get a pedometer that counts your steps. A lot of, again, smart devices will do that for you. And then lastly, when we talk about mental health or cognitive health, we want to, again, keep up with lifestyle factors that can protect against that cognitive decline, that dementia. So going back to continuing to be active, physically active. And a lot of studies, actually, I thought this was really interesting, that one of the biggest modifiable risk factors, meaning the main thing that we can do, like, forget genetics, forget circumstance, environment, the thing that we can do as a person, individual, to help reduce our risk for dementia is to stay physically active, is to exercise. And so, again, tying together all of the themes that we've been talking about. I'll take a pause here before I move into healthy habits and see if there are any questions, how we're doing on time.
Well, I have I don't see any questions, but I had one thing that I had picked up from listening to doctors and then listening to you as a doctor. Omega-3s. I did not realize how important they were until I started hearing, oh, okay, you need omega-3s. And then I heard you mention that from the 20s, and then they popped back up and they kept popping up. So just being cognizant of that in my own health journey, I'm like, I need to make sure I take those omega-3s. For me, they're a big vitamin, so they're the one that I'm like, maybe tomorrow, maybe I don't want to take that one today, but okay,
Yes.
they're important.
They are a big one. And I've been taking one consistently for several years now. And I take two actually, because I like to take the high doses, and they help with so much. Like, maybe this is too much, but I have like dry eyes. I have really bad
Mhm.
dry eyes. It's supposedly because of all my, my med school training. I don't know if that's true. That's what my eye doctor likes to tell me. But it helps with that, even that, like, right. There's like so many benefits to high dose omega-3s that I think that, it should be in the water or something. But yeah.
Well, I definitely will prioritize that vitamin.
Hmm.
We do try to eat the healthy fish, but I guess that's another question as you're moving into kind of like grocery shopping and eating at home with those omega-3s. Is it better to get the farm raised or the fresh caught or wild caught, or how do you kind of factor
Yeah.
in the heavy metals and the mercury in that decision?
That's a really good question. My first answer is whatever you can afford. I'll start there, because oftentimes people will just forget and just be like, I just won't do it, because they get caught up in like all of the or not different varying, information about what they should do. Should they do this or that, etc. And so I'll say first, whatever you can get is good. It's better than not trying, not at least trying to get these sources of nutrition. And then the second thing I'll say, when it comes to, we'll start with, I don't know if you meant in general, but I'll just answer it that way. If it comes to like produce, if you can afford organic, that's going to be better, just because of all the pesticides and the chemicals that are used in farming these days. And then we also know that the soil doesn't have as much nutrition as it used to in the past. And so we're realizing that even when you're eating foods that, or you're supposed to, quote, in with air quotes, you're still going to need to supplement for that reason, because the food isn't as nutritious these days as it used to be in the past. Now, outside of that, organic foods can be pretty pricey. And so what I say is, at least there's environmental working group puts out a list of the dirty dozen every year. And so that is the list of the most harmful, or the most the fruits and vegetables or produce that's heavily sprayed with insecticides and pesticides. And so those are the ones you definitely want to, if you can afford it, buy organic. And so that's what I'll say. That's like a happy medium. That's what I do, if I'm being honest, is that I'll try to at least do the dirty dozen organic, and everything else I'm not a bit too picky about. Um, and that's from like, introducing unwanted things into our diet. With respect to like fish and things like that that are wild caught versus farm raised, wild caught is going to be better than farm raised, just because of a lot of the practices with farming fish, etc., and seafood in general. So wild caught is going to be, oftentimes will have more nutrients in them and things like that. So if you can afford it, if you can find it, then that's going to be best. Now, another thing which we'll talk about here, and we can glaze over when I get to it, is another question I get is, should I buy frozen, canned, or fresh, right, when it comes to produce too? Because sometimes it's hard to, when you buy in bulk, for example, to kind of get through everything in time. And so people will often want to buy something that's a little bit processed to be able to make it last longer. From a health perspective, again, as long as you're eating vegetables, hey, I'm not going to be mad at you. I just want you to eat them. Now, once we're past that hurdle and we're like, okay, I'm buying them. Now what? I would say frozen. I'll be honest with you, buy frozen. If you can get through fresh, great. However, the average American, we're throwing out a lot of like fresh, especially salads and lettuce and leaves and leafy greens. We're not getting through what we buy for the week or whatever we buy in general. And so we want to reduce our food waste, of course, buy frozen where you can. They're packaged and frozen fresh, so you do still get a lot of the nutrients that you would otherwise get if you bought them fresh. Taste and texture, that's a different that's a different story. And then we'll go to canned. Now, when you do buy canned, I often say try to rinse them out if you can, not to use the brine that it's been sitting in, because brine, super processed, salty water, and that can lead to, especially if you have high blood pressure, that can be an issue there. Okay. So this is the last bit here where I'm going to talk about a little bit of healthy habits that you can practice that'll help you save money. And so cooking at home, this is something that a lot of people are like, well, I don't have the time to do that. There are so many easy and quick and hacks that you can practice that will that you can have, that anybody has time for really, and that you can save a lot of money. So a couple of things off the top of my head is buying a crock pot or a slow cooker so that you can put it in, put all the ingredients in literally overnight. And this will be cooking while you sleep, and you'll have something to take for lunch the next day, for example, or during the day or whatever. If you work from home, it's even better because you put it in the morning and then you've got lunch come lunchtime. The other thing is also like buying, let's say you can't put the whole thing together, buying, for example, a bagged salad and then a rotisserie chicken, for example, and then putting that together. So it's still a lot cheaper than buying a salad that you would, and not only is it cheaper, but you know what's going into it too. And I think that's another part that's really important, is when you're preparing your own meals, you know exactly how much of what is going into it. And so all of this to say that, and one of the things that I thought was really interesting was a study here from Harvard that you can save an average of $200 a month, which, I mean, I think that's pretty decent, right? That you can then save and splurge at Sephora. No, I'm kidding. But you can save a good amount of money, I would say. And then also studies that show that people who cook at home are with respect to obesity and overweight, are less likely to have obesity or overweight. And so that's something that's also important to pay attention to when it comes to kind of overall health, and tying that to costs down the line. When it comes to whole versus whole foods or low processed foods, we've kind of talked about this with regards to buying frozen versus buying frozen, which can be cheaper as well. And then buying a lot of plant forward or plant rich foods in your diet as well. And then moving more, a lot of times, a lot of the tips that I gave you through each decade revolved around activity. And so oftentimes people will think that the gym is what I'm talking about, and it doesn't have to be in the gym. You can literally go walking, and walking even for 30 minutes has considerable impact. It can reduce your risk of heart disease by 30%, and that's nothing to to sneeze at. And so I think that's really important to pay attention to these other creative ways to be active. You could put up a YouTube video, which I do often. I'll just pull up a YouTube video if I have some time between meetings, even sometimes, and just do a quick workout. Taking the stairs, parking further away. All of these seem like they're really minuscule or have really small impact. But I can say, as an obese, this is my obesity medicine hat now, all of those little things add up throughout the day. They become our little, we call them NEAT. So they're our non-exercise fat burners, basically. And so all of these little measures can make a difference on your overall calorie in, calorie out, basically. And then lastly, talking about sleep. Sleep is, I think, underrated. Sleep is so important for your mental health, for your physical health, for your weight. We do know that weight gain is associated with sleep. And so whenever we sleep less than ideal hours of sleep, we're hungrier because our hunger hormone goes up. And so we tend to eat more throughout the day, and that leads to weight gain. When we don't sleep enough hours, our cortisol levels are higher, which increases our retention of fat storage, which means our stress is higher. So many implications that, and I love sleep. So I love this one. I can talk about this for a while, but I won't. And then some tips with regards to like how you can improve besides what I mentioned earlier. If you're noticing that you are not feeling rested throughout the next morning or throughout the day, talking to your doctor about, or your practitioner about, or clinician, sorry, about getting tested. And then also things that we can do is to have a routine. Try to set your time by like whatever, let's say you go to bed at 10, by 9 o'clock, you're putting away your devices. You start to have maybe a routine where you read instead, reading a book, actual physical book, remember those? Or you have a skincare routine or something where you're winding down. And as you get into that habit, that's your cue for your body that, okay, it's time to slow down. We're going to go to bed. And so over time, that becomes a way for you to easily transition into sleep. and then cutting down on your screen time because of that blue light being activating as well. All right, so we're almost at the end of my slides here. The key point that I want to share is that your health is an investment and not an expense. And so all these small sustainable changes do add up to big savings, both for your health as well as your pockets. And so for anyone who's interested in working with me, here is a QR code that you can scan, and then that'll take you straight to my website. Here's my email address, and then my website again here. Thank you for your attention. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but that last slide, I will say, hit home with me. I had been working out with a trainer and I wasn't seeing exactly what I wanted. So we could measure visceral fat, and to your point, that's the bad kind. And he kept telling me, Christina, until you calm down, which meant get my cortisol levels in check
Manage your
and
stress.
de-stress. He's like, I can't really help you. All I can do is help you with your stretching and things like that, and we can continue to build muscle. But what's going to really have the most impact on your health is when you get that 7 to 9 hours sleep and you chill a little bit. And I noticed when I made some lifestyle changes and got that sleep, I was like, oh man, I lost 40 pounds. But
Oh, look at that.
it's that important. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that I was doing all the hard work and I was just hurting myself or not really helping myself in the way I needed to, because I was doing all the right things except for this one thing, which was my sleep, which impacted everything else. And when I
Exactly.
prioritized my sleep, then all the other good things that I've been doing, then that compounded effect happened. So
Exactly.
for me, it took a trainer going, I mean, you can continue to come to me and spend this money, but if you would just sleep, maybe it
I
would be
know.
working.
I
So,
mean, if you think about it, literally do nothing, right? Like just like, right?
right,
Get in bed
which
and
is
do nothing. Let nature take its course.
just chill with your sleep.
Mhm.
And I talked to a friend and they're like, I just can't get to bed at night. And I was like, put your phone down and find the driest book that I mean, like a topic that you don't like, I don't know, a journal, like something really technical, and start reading it. 2 pages in, you'll be passed out.
You'll be passed out. Absolutely. I completely agree. Another thing I always say too, sometimes we ruminate, which is that we like things that we like think about through, like we're just kind of circling around the same topics, right? Like either things throughout our day or something that happened in our day, etc. And so another thing that really helps is to do a brain dump. So this is different from journaling in a way, because people, the J word is quite triggering for a lot of people. And so it's just literally getting a piece of paper and writing down every thought that you're having, and then just like putting it away. Oftentimes that tells our subconscious mind, like, okay, we can rest now.
We can
That's a tip
always
I'd like to share.
pick it back up tomorrow, which
Exactly.
can be hard for some of us. But yeah, it was amazing to me when I made that shift. And so now I protect my sleep like I'm a pirate with a treasure. And I'm like, oh, I'm militant about it. I'm like, it's this time I got to go start my routine. And to your point, I do the skincare and
Good.
the reading, and it's just now part of what I do for myself.
Oh,
And
I
I've
love
seen the
that.
difference.
I've definitely seen that as well. I'm going to stop sharing. I've definitely seen that as well with a patient of mine who was like, I just can't, she was on medication too. And so she was just like, I still can't lose the weight. And I said, well, how many hours are you sleeping? And she said about 3 to 5. I said, let's fix that first. Let's fix
Yep.
that first.
So a takeaway is sleep. It costs you nothing except maybe a few more hours on your phone. It's definitely
Exactly.
important. Well, I'm gonna talk about all that money that we've saved now that we're sleeping and we don't have to go to the gym. We can walk at home and do things that are maybe saving us some money and some stress. And so what I've done in my past has always been real estate. So what I want to talk about is how healthcare costs are going to go up. We just, as we age, we tend to need to go to the doctor more, as we saw. But being able to be prepared for those things. So if we are working with a doctor and they say, hey, there may be a predisposition for these things, okay, understanding that might be a cost that we're going to have in the future with healthcare. And of course, costs tend to go up. You've seen it with inflation. Gone to the grocery store, they just tend to increase year over year. So how can we be prepared for that as we go through the different decades? And so my focus again is on real estate investing, and it's something that people can do really at any age and any stage. It's just what is suitable for you, and of course working with a professional to help you understand that. So I am going to go ahead, and I have some disclaimers because all investments have risk. So this is not advice, this is just education. These are thought-provoking things that folks can go back and say, you know what, I never knew that was out there, or I never knew that that was a possibility. Because in high school, they give us one semester of economics, one semester of government, and that tends to be senior year when your brain is focused on prom and graduation and next year. And you filed your FAFSA and you're financing college or whatever you're doing, and you're just not really focused on the task at hand. And so you get through it, and then you don't think about it until as you start your 20s and you do your adulting. Then you're like, wait a second, I signed a loan. What, I have credit cards, I have debt. What is this? How am I going to pay for that? I changed my major 5 times, and now what I thought was going to be my salary is not going to be my salary. And so all these things are happening at a time where you're also tend to be out of the nest, and so you don't have your parents, and so there's just a lot going on. So it is not uncommon for people to not have invested, or don't have investments, or just don't know where to start. So I'm, like I said, just going to talk through educational things on real estate. And so always going to point people back to a financial professional, because there is no one right investment for everyone. And so any good broker dealer or financial planner is going to sit down and talk to somebody about where they are in their investment journey, what their goals are, their objectives, and really make recommendations that make sense to that person. There is no one size fits all approach to investing, and they all have risk. But a lot of times, people, when they think about money, they think, oh, I have $100. I got $100 for Christmas. And they put it in a wallet or a purse, and they say, okay, that's going to go into the rainy day, or I'm going to spend it. I would say this: if you have $100 and you go spend it, it's worth more today than it will be worth in a year, because in a year, that inflation, that 2%, now that $100 is worth $98. And if you wait 10 years, that $100 is worth even less. And so I did a simple experiment. I said, okay, and going through the research and talking to Dr. Al-Barwani, I was like, okay, what if a person just saved $85 a month because they're cooking at home, and instead of going out for Taco Tuesday and having Margarita Monday, or whatever, Wine Down Wednesday, whatever people do, what if they save that $85 and a little bit of health, and they put that into an account? Well, if they just put it in the freezer, or they just put it in a coffee can, it's just going to be the $85 in perpetuity. But if you factor in inflation, that $85 becomes less. So let's just say I had $1,000 that I saved every year. And instead of putting it in a low interest account, I said, I'm going to find an investment that I'm going to make about, on average, 8% of growth. And I'm going to put it in, and I'm not going to touch it. And so the nominal value in 20 years. So if I took that $1,000, didn't account for inflation, what's going on outside of it, but just said, okay, I'm going to put it in this investment and let it compound at 8% for 20 years, I'd have $4,660. So that's a nice cruise. That's a pretty decent all-inclusive vacation. That's Christmas gifts. That's birthday. That's something that people can tangibly spend in 20 years. If I didn't do anything with that, again, now the 2% inflation is eating away at my $1,000. And I think when I did the math, it was like I then had 20 years later $750. So definitely want to make sure that we're fighting inflation with some sort of investment, or some sort of interest-bearing account. And so then when I looked at the interest adjusted value, or inflation adjusted value in 20 years, that 1,000 is actually would be worth $3,136 today. So inflation is there. The Federal Reserve aims for 2% inflation. So whenever I'm doing anything, I just assume that the Federal Reserve has done their job. The economy is working in a perfect world, which we don't live in. We're only inflating at 2% per year, which means every year your buying power deflates by 2%. So what people have figured out is, I got to put my money somewhere that it doesn't just deflate, because the economy is inflating, or the interest that my money could be making is going to have to combat inflation. So just a really simple chart, but just to get people thinking, okay, I'm saving this money, but if I just sit on it, then I'm potentially actually losing it every year. So housing, why do I like real estate? Housing will always be in demand. People always need a place to live. Even people who choose to be unhoused, they have to sleep somewhere. They're sleeping on a piece of ground somewhere. So there is value in real estate. And so if you look at average rent growth, typically rent goes up 4 to 5%. That's historical. And then if you look at the public real estate investment trust market, so those big real estate companies out there that have office buildings, industrial, warehouses, retail, multifamily, if you look at all of them, they tend to have an average annual return of 10.92%, which is pretty much on par with the stock market. So it's just another way to diversify into another asset class. So it's not like owning a tech stock or a grocery store or something like that. It's invested in a real estate investment trust. And so here are a couple of ways that people can invest. They can go into a publicly traded REIT, so they can go buy shares of a public real estate company, and those typically pay a dividend, so they're getting a little bit of income every quarter, plus then the value of the shares as they hopefully increase. That's always the goal when we invest, is to increase in value. The company grows and increases. Some people are able to go to private funds, and when they go to private funds, those funds are restricted to the types of investors they can have, and then they have kind of different strategies that they employ. So those are also an option. And then a lot of people are like, you know what? I want to do it myself. I want to maybe do one-by-one investments. Maybe they have a spouse or a partner who wants to manage the real estate portfolio while the other person focuses on their career. Seen all of that. So those are just all different ways people can get started in real estate investing. What we focus on here at my company is real estate investing through a fund. So we have a fund strategy that is open to accredited investors. And what accredited investors mean is that they meet a certain income level, or they have a certain net worth. And so I actually did a blog on how people can either become accredited investors or what that means. And there's a couple other different ways that are besides income or net worth. So I encourage people to go to our website and read that, because there's different financial services licenses that people can get. So when I hear somebody say, well, I'm in my 20s and I'm not at that income level yet, I haven't built that net worth, or I didn't inherit that net worth, there are other ways through financial licenses that people may be able to become accredited investors. So I always tell people, educate yourself, know what you're comfortable with and what your path is, and see how you can get there. But what private funds do is they open up another avenue of investing for people who maybe want to do real estate that is more opportunistic, or they want to do debt funds, things like that, that maybe aren't publicly traded. So it just opens up more options. And of course, what I wanted to show in this chart is that the historical performance of some of these are right there, anywhere between 4 and 10%. So again, you're combating inflation, and these folks are getting returns comparable or maybe a little less than the market, but then they're actually in a real asset, so it helps diversify their portfolio. So those are considerations for these private funds. So when people tell me, hey, I like real estate, I like the idea of having it, there's, like I said, multiple ways that people can do it. They can buy and hold real estate individually. And so just on this this chart, it's just some ideas to consider. So when people are looking at real estate investments, why would I buy and hold? What are my goals with that? Do I want to buy and renovate and rent and refinance and repeat? Do I want to start my own YouTube channel and do that? That's a plan. Some people have done that. It's just very much that you're taking on full control and full responsibility. So for people who like the idea of real estate but don't want to have all of the responsibility, a lot of people start in publicly traded real estate investment trust. And I always say that's a great idea if you're new to investing or new to real estate and you really want to learn. Even if you're not invested in a publicly traded REIT, listening to their quarterly earnings calls, reading the 10K reports, and getting very familiar with the language and how they look at different things is very helpful. And even for seasoned investors, just understanding how these professionals and these corporations and boards look at real estate investing is just a great way to stay educated in the space. And so what we do, like I said, is a private fund. And so what we're helping people do is maybe they've done the one-off investing or the house hacking where they've, lived in a duplex and then rented out the other side. Those are options that a lot of people have tried on their own. Then they realize they get the 3 a.m. phone calls about the plumbing, or they're on vacation and they're not really on vacation. And so a lot of folks have said, you know what, I did that and I don't want to do it myself anymore. And so what a fund can offer is scalability. So people can come in with an investment instead of having to buy a giant apartment building on their own, then they can buy into a fund and then the fund does that. So they're leveraging the buying power of others within a fund. And of course that creates efficiencies and economies of scale that they couldn't achieve on their own. And then it also helps to mitigate risk. So if you own one house in one neighborhood and that's your source of rental income, but a tornado comes through and your source of rental income is heavily damaged, of course you have insurance, but you're out your deductible. And then you're out having to meet with the adjuster, and then you're out having to meet with the roofer, and then you're out having to project manage. Meanwhile, you may also be a doctor or an attorney or a teacher or whatever your day-to-day job is. And having to manage that could create stress. It could create things that you just don't want to deal with in your life. And so that's where the risk mitigation of being in a fund with multiple assets helps offset some of those downside risk. And then, of course, if I've worked for companies where we had different properties in different parts of the country. And so if one was experiencing a hurricane, then the other parts of the country weren't. And so that was still going to make sure that bills got paid. And of course, residents got taken care of, because if your home is on fire or in a hurricane, you're probably not picking up the phone, but people in other parts can help deal with that. So that's another level of risk mitigation. And of course, we talked about stress. If you're a passive investor in a fund, then your money is what you're willing to risk. And so you're out there having your vacation and you're enjoying life, and then you get your quarterly statements or your monthly, you're checking your portfolio and you're like, okay, things are good, or hey, I have a question for this person, but you're not having to deal with the day-to-day operations. And then there are potential tax benefits with that. And so just always telling people, just understand your risk tolerance and what you are willing to do and what that liability entails for you and your financial situation. And talking to a financial professional is a great way to put that all into focus. And just real quick, because I'm not a CPA and this is just high level education, there are potential tax benefits. So a lot of times people, when they think about real estate investing, they only really focus on the income. And there are multiple ways to get income. If you're focused on income for today, then that's kind of one set of real estate investing. If you're focused on growing and you can have a longer term hold, that's another part of real estate investing. And then how you want or need those tax benefits is kind of a blend of the two. So really understanding your situation, what you have, what's available to you as an investor, whether you're unaccredited or accredited, whether you want exposure to publicly traded or private accounts or funds, and then also what kind of tax protection do you need? Are you a high earner, or do you want to look at tax deferred or tax free income, those sorts of things. So making sure you understand what your tax bracket is and how those investments could potentially affect you is important, which is why tax professionals are important. And then sometimes people who have real estate investments will throw around, I 1031 it. I did a 1031. And the rest of us are like, okay. And we smile and nod. And what they're talking about is being able to defer the capital gains taxes on the sale of that property until they finally relinquish the property. And so people can do that in perpetuity. So they can buy a property, and then when they go to sell it, they could find a qualified intermediary who holds the proceeds from that sale. And then they have a certain time limit. And you see this on the slide. They have 45 days to declare which properties they're going to buy, and then 180 days to close it. And that is a very simplistic view of this, because there's rules even around how many properties and values and things like that. But just understand it's not just an easy, oh, well, I sold this property a year ago and I took this money and then I waited. and then I bought something and I didn't have to pay my capital gains tax. You can't do that. There are rules. But if you follow the rules, then what happens is that that capital that you made from the sale of that first property goes into the second property. You don't touch it. The qualified intermediary handles that transaction for you and with you. And then you don't pay capital gains tax on that. Now, if you sold the second property and you're like, I made $1 million and I'm happy with that and I don't want to be in property anymore, then you would pay taxes at that time. But if you continue to do 1031 exchanges and the tax code didn't change, then you could continue to defer that capital gains tax. So that's why people like 1031 exchanges. And then of course, if somebody's like, well, I've done it to do it myself and I don't want to do it myself anymore, but I still want to do the 1031, that's where having that tax professional and that financial planner can help you go, okay, well, let's see what options there are in a private fund for you to still do a 1031 exchange and maybe a different vehicle than what you've been previously doing. So that was a very quick overview of why you would want to consider real estate as part of your investment structure for your end goal of being able to mitigate healthcare costs. So any questions? I'm going to stop sharing just for now, but again, our website is there and happy to have a call to talk through what we do with accredited investors and our fund structure. Let's see.
I don't know if we have time, Christina. I know that you had wanted to talk a little bit about HSAs.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that, how even if you're not investing in real estate, a lot of folks don't know what their benefit package looks like with their current employer or what options they may have if they're self-employed or they're a business owner. And you'd mentioned a friend was using their HSA to buy sunscreen. And there are so
Exactly.
many ways that people can, use their employee accounts. Like when I was employed for a large corporation, they had discounts that I didn't know about with different pharmacies. Like we got preferred pricing if we used a specific pharmacy. So I tell people focus on what you do have. So understand what your finances look like, understand what your current benefit package looks like, and take advantage of those free or reduced cost services. But like a flexible spending account or a health savings account, if you're eligible for those, they can help reduce your income and income taxes at the end of the year, but also support that healthy lifestyle. So it goes back to making sure that you're educated on what resources you have now or what resources you qualify for, and making sure that you take advantage of those and saving yourself some money, because it will save stress in the long run, being able to have that money for investing and also for achieving your goals, your health goals. Awesome. Well, I'm looking to see, I don't see any additional questions. But hopefully we have helped folks understand that there are so many different little adjustments that you can make, whether it's in your health or in saving money, and then looking towards ways to invest that that you can have that exponential return on either your health or your wealth or both. And both would be the goal, is that staying healthy helps you have less stress and be able to take that $4,000 that you have over 20 years and go take a nice cruise or a vacation or do something, a health retreat, something fun.
Exactly. Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Christine. I had a lot of fun talking about this today, and I loved hearing your portion of it. You're like, I learn so much every time I talk to you. Thank you so much.
Well, absolutely. And we're happy to do this again. And so if anyone is watching this on the replay and you have questions, please reach out to Dr. Aalia Al-Barwani. You can always reach out to us, and we're happy to talk through your situation. And I always tell people, if I can't help you, I probably know somebody who can. So definitely good to be connected in this world. All right. Well, thank you, doctor.
Thank you, Christina. Have a great day.
You too.